NPCs. They're the guys in video games who repeat the same lines, have no capacity for thought, and are constantly losing fights with doorways. Now, if you're anything like me, you've met a few NPCs in your real life. Like the people who download opinions faster than your uncle can download high-speed internet porn. But I've got some bad news for you. And that is that you are likely an NPC and you don't even realize it. You see, there's 5 different types of cognitive bias that turn us all into NPCs, and today we're going to find out which one you are, and if we're lucky, we might even be able to deprogram it. By the way, this video idea was ripped ruthlessly from an article by Gurwinder Bogle. I've linked the article down below, it's definitely worth your time. Anyway, what turns humans into NPCs in the first place? Well, to find out, we need to look at our prehistoric ancestors. It turns out our brains are just too efficient for their own good. You see, back in prehistoric times, if a human was thinking through every little decision to try and find the right answer, that guy got killed, okay? His ass got eaten, and instead we evolved from the dumbasses who got answers that were just kind of good enough to get us to our next meal. And so Mother Nature evolved for us these mental shortcuts to get us answers that just kind of keep us alive. And that brings us to the first type of NPC, which is the conformist. Now, if you're a conformist NPC, I don't even need to ask you what you believe. Instead, I can just open Instagram.com and look at what your favorite celebrities posted about recently, and I've pretty much got you figured out. You see, if you're a conformist NPC, you adopt whatever's trendy. You wear it like clothing, like fashion, like a trend. You don't think through any of your opinions, because why would you? You don't have to. And one of the biggest signs that you're a conformist NPC is that you have this kind of blind trust in the experts. Now you might be thinking, why would that be a bad thing? Why would I not trust the experts? That seems like common sense. Well, a recent 2016 study showed that that might actually sometimes be the worst thing you can do. So, it's 2016. This scientist named Lachlan Gunn wants to do this study into police lineups and eyewitness testimony. So he gets this group of people together, they witness a video of a crime, and then together they have to decide from a police lineup who committed said crime. And they found something that was really kind of bizarre. You see, the more people agreed on who the suspect was who did the crime, the less likely that was to be the correct answer. And it kind of makes sense if you start to think about it. You see, whenever there's something that's objective, that's clear cut, the more people agree, the more likely that is to be correct. But when something's more subjective, like watching someone commit a crime but it's kind of dark, or something that's more subjective like the social sciences, you would expect people's opinions to kind of lie on a distribution, right? People come from different backgrounds, they have different experiences and different beliefs. And so when something isn't clear cut, you expect them to choose different options. And typically, whenever there is something that's subjective and everyone aligns on one or two things, it's usually a good sign that there's something else that's at play. Take academia, where researchers and professors, they gain their reputation by being cited and published by other academics in the space. And so that's a pretty clear incentive to never go against the grain and always kind of align with the status quo, even if they don't agree with it. And so then this creates this kind of echo chamber. If you want to succeed in academia, you've got to kind of convince yourself that you do believe these things, or at the very least publish it, if you want to have any kind of success. We saw this somewhat controversially recently with the UK Cash Report, which was this kind of review of all the research into the idea of the safety and efficacy of giving puberty blockers to minors. They found something kind of bizarre, which was that a bunch of these like trans health activist groups like WPATH or the Endocrine Society were creating this false sense of scientific consensus by just referencing each other's really bad, horrible research. And the thing is, it's not even just with academia. With media and with Hollywood, you're not getting the job, you're not getting the audience or the following unless you subscribe to the beliefs of the company that's hiring you. And so whenever that happens, the people who get an audience and then can preach to that audience, there's this kind of survivor bias where you have to align with the message in the first place, and then you preach to an audience of loyal fans who adopt your opinions, creating more and more conformist NPCs. And what's weird is that you know that these people don't even believe the things that they're saying. Like the whole fat acceptance movement blew up as soon as Ozempic came around, or the people promoting the idea of things that are sick, like rights for LGBT people or women's rights, but they're dead silent about the very cultures and societies that demean and oppress these people. Or the idea of cultural appropriation went right out the window the second that these white kids from suburbia could protest about a country that they'd never heard of 2 years ago, and they can don a headscarf to do it. But alas, That's enough dogging on the left, okay? We're kicking them while they're down at this point, and instead it's time to turn our attention to the right. See what I did there? Because we're talking about like the political right, but then I turned to the contrarian. Now, the contrarian is like the next evolution in the path of the conformist, okay? Typically, these guys got burned one too many times by the lies and the twists of the mainstream and Hollywood. Things just didn't make sense. And so, rather than taking the approach of, you know what, from now on, I'm going to apply some logic to everything that comes in. I'm going to really critically think about my beliefs where I could be wrong. Nah. Instead, they adopt this thing of, well, if the mainstream says it, then it must be a lie. So these guys, they've been burned and they start watching other alternative sources, and they can range from more reasonable voices like Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman to slightly more fringe like Tucker Carlson and Russell Brand. And eventually all roads lead to Alex Jones.
What do I do, Lord? Destroy the child, corrupt them all. This is their plan, people. These are demons.
And the thing is, these guys, they kind of fancy themselves to be like the black sheep of society, but they forget and they don't realize that a black sheep is still just a sheep.
When it comes to wearing masks, how do you know if that's a good idea or not?
Because if people more powerful than me are telling me to do it, I instantly don't believe them.
Okay, do you understand that that just makes you a sheep of the other herd, right?
Of what herd?
If there is yeah, I'm telling you, if there is a shepherd and he says all the sheep go left, you can either choose your own path or you can go right because he told you to go left. You understand? You're being justice controlled, right?
So who's controlling me?
The people that you don't like.
A sign that you're contrarian is that you define yourself in opposition to this kind of cabal that's keeping the man down. You know, whether that's the system, the elites, or God forbid, the Matrix. And the contrarian is yet another gift to us from Mother Nature in a bias called hyperactive agency detection, which is a fancy way of saying that a bunch of our ancestors were paranoid freaks. Okay, and the thing is, it kind of helped them to survive. Like, it was way more advantageous to think that Bob from the tribe was going to try and steal everyone's food and steal your wife, because he was, or to think that that tiger's actually not smiling at me and that motherfucker wants to eat me, because again, he did and he does. But again, this kind of paranoia isn't suited to today's world in the same way. Like, look, before I say this, it's worth noting, okay? Let me bring it in, folks, right? Because it's worth noting that I have been just about every NPC on this list. So please don't take it personally. If you are this kind of NPC, it's all love, okay? But being a contrarian makes no fucking sense, okay? Because the thing is, there's a reason why it stands out so much whenever there's a lie that's caught out on the news, or when Alex Jones finally gets something right and he predicts something correctly. And that's because usually it's the exact opposite. That's why it stands out. Like, journalists, do they lie sometimes? Do they mislead people sometimes? 100%. I'm never going to doubt that. But at the same time, these people are held to strict journalistic standards that people like Jones, like now Tucker Carlson and Brand, just aren't held to in the same way. And so yes, unfortunately, you kind of have to vet these people, okay? It is not worth it to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just abandon any kind of integrity altogether, okay? But look, all this thinking, all this researching and finding the opposite opinion or finding out which celebrity to think about, this is all exhausting, okay? Instead, we need one voice, one person, and one truth. And that is when you become a disciple. So a disciple is what happens when the contrarian or the conformist, they get tired and they just want to be told what to think. It's kind of like meeting a stripper. You know, you just want them to tell you what to do, how to think, and what to feel. Is that just me? But anyway, the problem is that we all do this, okay? Humans, for whatever reason, have this real bias towards charismatic figures because they exude this kind of confidence and this assuredness that makes you feel safe when times are really down. And so we turn to these people who they seem so sure about the world, so sure about what's going to happen and why, that they must have it figured out. So I don't need to really think about these things through. I can just turn to that person. And what's so strange is that this kind of draw that we have, this like fly to the weird zapper thing that we have towards charismatic people, it completely overrides our brain's ability to use logic. Like, take all the people who love Trump. A lot of people love Trump because they hate the lies of the news, okay? But Trump lies like all the time about stuff that that doesn't even matter. Or like the left absolutely adores Obama and adores immigration, and yet Obama deported like far more people than Trump ever did, okay? Because they're just so charismatic that their brains just don't care anymore. This tendency for us humans to act like disciples also explains why podcasts are so annoying today. Because the chances of you being in the top 10th percentile of people who are really knowledgeable and educated and a proper researcher, and also a top 10th percentile of being a great orator and being really charismatic, it's literally 1%. Okay, so usually the people who are most loud, who are most charismatic in the space, aren't the people who know the most, they're just the people who are really good at talking about a given subject matter. But that doesn't make them right. What's worse is that the typical kind of idol for the disciple NPC is usually just a contrarian NPC themselves. I mean, people like Elon Musk, Andrew Tate, Hassan Piker, they're all really, really busy people. And so they don't have the time to go through and research carefully and cross-reference this piece of information with this one and read through the study and these sources. No, instead, they'll typically just read headlines from a source that they like and regurgitate that information to their followers. And so there gets this weird kind of situation where contrarian NPCs are the ones who are breeding disciple NPCs, and it's just copy after a copy after a copy. But look, if you're still with me, it probably means that you haven't actually seen yourself yet. And that's okay, because we've still got 2 more. And the next one is going to get more than a few of you. And that is the tribalist. So these are the people who are the blue no matter who, red also no matter who, okay? It's the guys who are hardlined with their party pretty much no matter what. And even just the kind of loyalty to a party doesn't really make that much sense. Like, the likelihood that you're going to politically align on things like abortion, healthcare, immigration, gun control, all of these things in sequence are actually kind of low because a lot of them actually contradict each other. And instead, if you do have this weird loyalty, it's usually a case that you've fallen into this kind of tribal thinking. And this one usually is at its worst because of the actor-observer bias. Essentially, what it comes down to is, if my guy does something that is kind of distasteful, he had his reasons, okay? There were a number of reasons why he'd do that. But if your guy does it, if I'm being reasonable and I'm being fair, it's most likely because he's an evil pedophilic vampire. That's the only explanation that I can come up with for why he would do it, personally, okay? I'm just trying to be fair here. In the past, questioning the group didn't make you look smart. It just got you exiled and ultimately killed. So you gotta stick with the tribe, stick with the ones who brought you. One of the coolest ways of seeing these tribal NPCs in action is one of Gurwinder's ideas called nutpicking, which is essentially where one side, say the right, will take a crazy rando voice from a guy with 0 followers on the left who's shouting some crazy thing about giving kids enough hormones to turn them into Hulk Hogan, and they'll act like that is the opinion of the left as a whole. And the same thing happens on both sides, and what typically makes it worse is that someone then on the other side will feel like they have to defend this crazy nut job idea, and then they get into a fight back and forth over an idea that no one actually even believes. And the whole game of like this tribal kind of warfare ends up just being 2 straw men just fighting each other to the death. But here's the thing, I see you. You're thinking, not me, Matthew. I'm above it all. You see, I know that both sides have a point. And if you're thinking that, it's probably because you're the last type of NPC, the averager. Now, this isn't to be confused with the idea of a centrist. See, a centrist is someone who will take opinions from both sides of the aisle. They're kind of an anti-tribalist. So someone might be really pro-women's rights, pro-abortion, but also think that immigration could do with tightening up a little bit. That would be a centrist. Whereas an averager is more of the type of person who's like, yeah, with the whole Ukraine-Russia thing, I think both sides have a point. And that kind of thinking can be dangerous whenever there is a more clear-cut answer. Like, whenever you take some issue like, should we have slaves and slavery, taking the kind of middle ground position there, or sitting on the fence, is doing no one any favors and just makes you feel smart even though you haven't actually said anything or put anything at stake. And the ironic thing is that the averager probably ends up doing less thinking than any other type of NPC. So if you're watching this and you're thinking critically, which of course you are if you got to this point, then you probably realize that you've got some tendencies for one or two of these kinds of NPCs, or at the very least, you have in the past. But the good news is that Gurwinder has this cool kind of mental model that can help us all to become playable characters. And it's a 3-tiered system of beliefs. So the first system is your tertiary beliefs, and this will be where 99.9% of all things lie. As John Maxwell put it, never underestimate the unimportance of practically everything. There's just too many things to have opinions on, and you have absolutely no reason to have an opinion on everything you come across. If anything, if you did, you'd be guessing all of the time, and there's no point. So instead, a perfectly okay answer is, I don't really know enough about it, or I haven't really looked into it, so I don't really know. Again, the person you're talking to probably doesn't know anything about it, and they're probably an NPC anyway. And it makes you look smarter, not dumber, by acknowledging the areas where you don't have any expertise. Next up, we have your secondary beliefs. Now, these are the things that you care about, but you're not dying on this hill. Like, you're not going to stake your entire identity on it. You're still loose. Be water, my friend. This is where, now in this category, the table stakes are that you're watching debates on it, that you're looking at both sides, that you're reading up on it to understand what the topic is. I mean, you're interested in it after all. This is something that you do believe in. But at the same time, you're open to new information. You want to learn more. And so you're not going to stake your identity here. That's not what this belief's for. For secondary beliefs, curiosity is the goal, not complacency. And then finally, you have your primary beliefs. Now, these are the things that you know inside and out. And to have a primary belief, you need to know the other side's arguments better than they do. You know this topic like it's the back of your hand, and you're willing to argue with just about anyone about it. The point here is not to never be wrong. It's to own your own beliefs, to run your own code. And that's it for me. Catch you in the next one. Peace.